Hello and welcome to the Inside the Birds NFL Draft Special. Geoff Mosher and not Adam Caplan, Greg Cosell. I'm so used to saying it. Adam's not with us. We have Greg Cosell. Of course, the show is presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. And you can start to say it, man, with the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round, death, taxes, and a move up. But Greg, it's not just a move up for anybody. It's a move up one spot for a player that many people we've spoken to, and you've watched the tape and talked about it, could be the best overall player in the draft. The rich get richer, my friend. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not going to discuss the off the field because we don't know. Obviously, the Eagles did all their homework and they felt very comfortable. And once he was there, and they knew he'd be there, as soon as they knew that Bijan Robinson was going at 8, they knew that they needed to move up one to get Jalen Carter. And, he's arguably the best prospect. Even if he's not the best, he certainly was top 2 or 3. And as we discussed in the sort of the pre-draft show, the hour and a half that we did a little earlier tonight, I mean, there's really nothing about Jalen Carter's game that you say that's a significant weakness. Now,
Right.
As we said before, no one's a finished product because the level of competition goes up significantly. But there's really not a lot about Jalen Carter that you can say, boy, I don't think he can do that.
Correct. Correct. He should be an instant plug and play defensive tackle in their front, assumingly it's a 5-man front. And when they go to 4-3, let me ask you, pass rusher, is he a right away 4-down lineman kind of pass rusher in the nickel?
I think his traits are,
Okay.
The question is just getting acclimated to the league. Obviously, when you do your homework on a player like Carter, I'm sure what you do as well is you talk to players on your team. You have veterans like Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. I mean, you and I know that Graham is just an unbelievable guy. Guys like that ideally it's not just, don't forget, Jordan Davis is a second-year player. Nakobe Dean is a second-year player. They're still getting acclimated to the league to a certain extent, but they have a lot of veterans that can really help Jalen Carter ideally stay on track. And I'm not talking about off the field. That's critically important, obviously, but I'm talking about as a player, because this guy was so good at times on tape in the SEC, but it's still now a jump to the league. And there will be moments where it's just not the same, where this is harder, and it's going to be harder snap after snap. But as I said, you're dealing with a guy that really does not have a defined weakness as a player. And I think he can step right in. And, the nice thing about the Eagles is he doesn't have to play 60 snaps a game. The Eagles are in a situation with their defensive front, even with the loss of Hargrave, that they don't need a guy that's going to come in and have to play 60 snaps. They still have a good amount of depth, quality depth, and he could play 30 snaps and probably be a factor.
Absolutely. We'll see where he integrates as a rookie. It's funny that you brought up this is a different league now, right? I mean, not everything's the same as when you were in school, because at some point this season, probably pretty early, maybe, certainly in OTAs and camp, Jalen Carter is going to jog out onto the field, look to his left and see Jordan Davis, look behind him and see Nakobe Dean and think, man, this may be not so much different as I thought. Right. But so that's a good nucleus there. And it sort of segues into something we brought up in the pre-draft show from 6 to 7:30. I want to reiterate some points that we made for anybody who didn't catch that show. Number one, we said, look, the Eagles are going to be the Eagles. We expect, based on what we heard, that they are going to emphasize the trenches, whether offensive line or defensive line. They did that. Number two, as it pertains to Jalen Carter, we were told he was on their board. They were comfortable with him. They visited with him. They interviewed his defensive coordinator for their defensive coordinator job, Glenn Schumann. So they had a ton of information. They were clearly comfortable with him. They obviously drafted him. And the third point we said was we sort of doubted that he would make it to 10. So that's why we analyzed him and went on to other guys. Well, we were right about that. He did not make it to 10. The Eagles felt they had to jump up to 9 to get him.
And
so go ahead,
Geoff. It's fascinating. Who did we talk about a lot on the offensive line in our pregame show that the Bears just took at 10?
Darnell Wright.
You got that. You got that right, as to use a pun there. So, but getting back to Carter, obviously that's who Eagles fans are excited about. This guy I mean, I can picture right now because as I said earlier, I watched a ton of tape on him, and just his ability to move people is was pretty impressive. You know, you don't see that even at the college level. And I'm talking about, you know, obviously the SEC is the best conference in the country. It's still not the NFL, even though some people might think that, you know, Alabama or Georgia could beat, you know, the Houston Texans, which of course they couldn't. But still, the ability to move people and also the speed and athleticism. I mean, this guy's a really good player. He'll get in better shape too. But it's he's a really good prospect. I mean, we have to remember we use the word player a lot, Geoff, but we have to remember it's their prospect still.
Absolutely, there's a learning curve. But when you went into the night, you know, we were talking about this as we went through certain prospects. It was hard to see Jalen Hurts. I'm sorry, hard to see Jalen Carter. Man, the Eagles have a thing for Jalen's, by the way.
Apparently, yeah.
Hurts, Carter, Rager, there's a lot. So, but it was hard to see because of the talent alone,
Yeah.
right? Him maybe getting to 9 or 10. But when you take a team, Greg, that was just in the Super Bowl, that has a lot of offensive talent, they're going to score a lot of points, that was trying to rebuild a defense that was very good, lost a lot of players, lost Javon Hargrave, and you get a chance to replenish it with a guy who projects to be an elite talent, who is considered a blue chip talent in a draft shorter than some on it. I don't want to call it steal, but I should mention, because I didn't say this yet, to move up from 10 to 9 only cost them a fourth round pick, a future fourth round pick.
Yeah, that really.
I'm very curious to see how that value works out. I'm surprised, but that feels like a great scenario, the best case scenario for the Eagles.
It does. And as we discussed, and I think it's worth reiterating, this team, you just made the point, they will score a lot of points, and they will. So what is really their philosophical approach? Because every team has to have an approach. You're not randomly, number one, you're not randomly drafting players. You're not randomly putting a roster together. You know, you all this starts with a philosophy and a belief in how you want to play and what you want your team to look like, Geoff. And we even spoke about this during the season on the pregame show, you know, with you, myself, Adam, and Jason Avant, about what are the Eagles want to be and what are they really? Is there an offensive-based football team that wants to get ahead in the first half by throwing the football? You know, because they ran the ball so well, everybody said they were a running team, but they were really a passing team to score, get ahead. Okay, and then they would run the ball. But what's the flip side of that defensively? We want to rush the quarterback in the second half because we're ahead. So now what does the other team need to do? They need to throw the football. So we need to rush the quarterback. And in an ideal world, we want to rush the quarterback with 4 or 5 down linemen, not have to start bringing linebackers and secondary people because that changes coverage in a meaningful way. So now they drafted Jalen Carter, and now he's part of that mix. And we don't know sitting here tonight how many snaps he will play, how OTAs will go, how training camp will go. But I think Jalen Carter, with the talent that he has, is a player that you can play 25, 30 snaps a game right off the bat. You know, maybe that doesn't happen the first game of the season, but I would expect, all things being equal, that happening relatively quickly.
I want to ask you a prospect comparison question about Jalen Carter. First, I want to tell everybody that it's Ocean Casino Resort's 5th birthday this summer. They can't wait to celebrate with you. Join Ocean for exciting promotions and sweepstakes, headline entertainment, the best day life and nightlife lineup in AC, the debut of the birthday bar, exclusive local collabs and partnerships, commemorative 5th birthday merchandise, and so much more. Don't miss stunning fireworks and unique events all summer long. Ocean Rewards members will enjoy over $5 million in gifts and prizes, so be sure to sign up for an Ocean Rewards card to get in on the fun next time you visit. Want to ask you, because he's obviously the highest taken sort of 3 technique defensive tackle, not Jordan Davis, like since they took, I'm going to say Fletcher Cox, I believe. So how would you compare Jalen coming out of college, if I can go all the way back to, I guess, 2012, right? When Fletcher Cox was coming out of Mississippi State. Similar, different, anything that you can, I know we're several years away, but anything that jumps
similar.
out?
I mean, as soon as that it became evident that it was Carter, I started to think of comparisons myself. Do you remember the year, I think they were taken 2 and 3, Ndamukong Suh and Gerald McCoy?
Yes.
I think he's kind of a mixture of both, because Suh was probably more purely powerful and not as twitchy, although Carter is powerful. and McCoy was the twitchier guy, So I think Carter kind of is sort of falls in between, but he's sort of an interesting combination of both.
Yeah.
For people who
What
can remember that, I know that goes back a few years, but that's the
right.
way, in thinking about it, I kind of saw it that way in my mind.
And it's funny as we, have the conversation because the offensive linemen we spoke about, they went off the Darnell Wright, Peter Skronsky. So in that neighborhood, we were targeting those names were certainly part of the landscape. Let me ask you about Sean Desai a little bit. He's obviously the new
Yeah.
Eagles defensive coordinator. You saw him 2 years ago be the coordinator of the Chicago Bears. Schematically, any idea what you might expect he can do with Jalen Carter other than line him up at 3 technique and rush the passer? Like what other things he might want to do? Is he a stunter,
Oh yeah,
slanter?
they
I mean,
did.
is a movement
Yes,
guy?
yes, 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 yes. I mean, Georgia featured multiple stun and pressure concepts. Georgia is one of those defenses with Kirby Smart. Obviously, he has a Nick Saban background. That they do a lot of slanting, stunting. They're not just a straight up and play defense. They're one of the most sophisticated defenses in college football. Obviously, they get 5 stars, of which Carter was one when he came out of the state of Florida. But yeah, they do a lot of things. So Jalen Carter has done that. Jalen Carter's even lined up at defensive end. It's funny you mentioned Fletcher Cox. I remember watching Fletcher Cox at Mississippi State, and he lined up at defensive end and rushed the quarterback in college.
Yes.
And he's done that with the Eagles through the years as well. Carter had snaps at Georgia this year where he lined up at defensive end and rushed the quarterback. So he's predominantly a defensive tackle, but he's a multi-position defensive lineman that you can use in different ways.
Right. And of course, we've seen Chris Jones have to do that throughout his career
Yeah.
as well, too, and succeed there. So all in all, I think it's again, best case scenario, didn't have to give up much, gave up a future pick. And oh, by the way, the Eagles improved their draft pick status somewhat on day 2 because they, as it came out right before the draft, they swapped picks from 94 to 66 with the Arizona Cardinals in what became a sort of a tampering violation by the Cardinals with how they handled their contact with Jonathan Gannon when he was defensive coordinator of the Eagles right around the Super Bowl time.
Right.
So the Eagles, once again, sort of benefit from a draft prospect way. Are there any other Georgia guys that the Eagles can just take at 30 because, hey, is Kelly Ringo in play at 30? Who else is from Georgia can help recreate this defense?
Well, I don't know if Ringo it was not one of my favorite corners. That doesn't mean that others don't think highly of him, but he could well be in play there. I do think that the Eagles, and you brought up this point in our pre-draft show, I do think the Eagles probably need to address outside corner, even though we know Bradbury and Slay will be the starters this year. They're both over 30, and you just never know. You just never know. You don't want to get caught short with a team that clearly expects, and the expectation inside that building, as you know, is to be back in the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. You don't want to be caught short at a premium position, because if you are caught short at corner, then you have a problem.
That is absolutely correct. Now we know this year, unlike last year, they gave himself a little bit more veteran presence by at least signing Greedy Williams. But I agree with you. It's been a long time since they were really able to hit on a young corner that they can draft and develop. And we know that James Bradbury and Darius Slay aren't getting any older. So perhaps corner at 30, if the Eagles wind up picking at 30, I would think Kalijah Cansey may be a little bit out of the question now with the selection of Jalen Carter, but you never know.
You never know. You never know. I mean, I think there's certain things, and I think the Eagles are very good at having a philosophy and sticking to it. I mean, 100%. Over the years, people can debate the philosophy. That's a different question. But they, in their mind, know how they want to play. They, in their mind, believe there's a certain way to win in this league, and that's what they do. You know that. I mean, you can always debate certain picks. That's easy. But I think in their mind, anything that's related to the passing game on offense and stopping the pass on defense will always be in play.
100%. All right, listen, we've got more work to do. The Eagles allegedly will pick 30th overall. At this point, if there's a prop bet somewhere on them not picking 30, I might just wager it all on that because Howie Roseman loves to wheel and deal. So we should be back sometime tonight. If the Eagles completely trade out of the first round, We may not be back because there wouldn't be much to recap, although maybe Greg and I will come on for about 10 minutes and go through some day 2 guys that they have their eyes on. But clearly the Eagles so far have to be happy getting Jalen Carter, moving up, not paying a huge price. That'll do it for this episode right now, this live stream of the Inside the Birds NFL Draft Preview. For Greg Cosell, I'm Geoff Mosher. Hopefully we'll be catching you again pretty soon.